Irish Travelogue, Searching Arnold Bax, March 2012. I get the train to Liverpool Airport, where thick fog brings rerouted and cancelled flights, plus alarm and hardly being able to see out the terminal windows. But it improves a little before my 30-minute flight to Dublin, with unassigned seats. I'm English, but 3/16 Irish from both family sides, and it's good to be making this first visit at last. I find the cheap bus to town, passing through some undeveloped areas and older housing, with road signs in kilometers, plus Gaelic under the English.
Check into a central hostel, then call at a couple of lavishly appointed Catholic cathedrals before the Temple Bar area across the river, a tangle of cobbled streets, including tacky bars and restaurants. The city has its own vibe, isn't so busy, and with the people often approachable and sunny, but includes darker undercurrents, with malcontents and beggars, and perhaps a sense of being on the edge of Europe and separated from it by the historically antagonistic British. There's interesting inefficiency in selling tickets for tomorrow at the bus station counter, the clerk wanting me to first go and find a timetable so they could see when their own services leave, but finally saying I can just get one the same day if arriving in good time. I'm interested in the great early 20th century English composer Arnold Bax, who traveled most summers across 3 decades to a remote coastal village in Donegal County in the Northwest. His music has intuitive, visceral movement and strong emotions and takes inspiration from Irish culture. I get the good value coach in the morning, 4 hours to Donegal town, past endless deep and bright green pasture, fields of colored crops, and untamed land that dips and banks chaotically with riotous foliage, perhaps recalling the spirited Irish mentality. Nice weather for this month, with moderate temperature and breeze, blue skies, and subtle lighting effects. The driver talks with me about the region while making furtive phone calls in relaxed professionalism, even outside an airport we call at. But in Donegal, a colleague inquires about a further bus for me. There's none this Sunday evening, despite my ticket going all the way, so I take a walk looking for another hostel, finding the only one closed due to a water supply problem. The modest town by the coast is set among hills featuring exquisite box-like buildings on terraced levels in high colors that might not pass boring British regulations. I drop by another church with people sitting in repose, then back to the station to ask more questions, and find a minibus stopping at Killybegs, a town halfway from here to Bax's, Glencolumkill. I pay the driver after seeing the bus in a different company's livery, but later find out my first ticket would still have been good. Killybegs is a fishing port, full of large working ships, but an evocative evening haze settles over the harbor. I pause on a bench, watching the sunset through a misty vista, while sailing boats in shadows gain an aura deeper than any masterly painting might find, before most of the boats light up inside as the town goes dark. These remote and tenuously connected places captivate with their communities and steady economies, where the lateral Celtic mindset and cultural interests can be related to evading the Roman and resisting the British empires, with their contrasting linear reasoning and business interests. Accents become challenging, and I try to speak clearly. I find a trusting bed and breakfast, asking me to call in the shop below in the morning to pay, and where the television national news is unsophisticated but lacks the nauseating propaganda found elsewhere. The onward bus the next day, I discover, isn't until the evening, so as I have only my shoulder bag, I decide to walk the last 28 kilometers to Glencolumkill, a narrow road continuously bending round the hills without pavements, but with little traffic, plus very fresh air. I first look down on a calm ocean disappearing off indistinctly before snaking inland for increasingly bleak and treeless terrain with thin brown grasses. I press on past the Turnal for coastal Kilcar and get to Carrick for a drink as the only village on the road. Later, wander aside down to one of the lakes in the vast and somewhat dangerous waterlogged stretches, where it seems only a squelching surface scrub stops you from sinking into peaty black mud below. I find a drier, raised area while scaring off the sheep, and rest a while, but although I'm hot, the water's too cold for a swim, while the stony bed looks unsafe. I complete my box pilgrimage within 8 hours, arriving at the valley facing a vast rise of rock on the far side, and with the Atlantic to the west shimmering at the end of a bay and narrow beach. It's geographically unusual as providing access inland and a degree of shelter, and has been inhabited for millennia. There are widely strewn village buildings with Gaelic spoken, and I get to a fading hostel perched on a headland for good views, with only an elderly landlady there, plus the sea's considerable sound and energy. In the morning, wander over to a little museum covering local past notables, before a woman there points out one of the buildings Bax used and helps with photos. I walk by phallic megaliths inscribed to commemorate St. Columba and to a small church with Celtic crosses on gravestones, then philosophize on rocks by the sea, drifting out where a dozen parallel lines of waves break all down the bay in repeated surges, as reflecting Bax's contrapuntal layering and drowning of formal architecture and the articulated mind. Some of his freshest and most colored invention originated here, and it's certainly removed from urban life, even if not the quietest place with the endless crashing against rocks. I stay a second night, noting the exceptionally starry sky.
Leave early for buses back to Donegal, then Letterkenny and Belfast in Northern Ireland. Part of Britain, though without border posts and using its pounds currency, while seeming more economically secure and stoic than Dublin, but expensive, with wealthy people in the center and having less character. Early 17th century British king, James I, confiscated northeastern land for English plantations, as then springing different cultural and Protestant Christian affiliations, contrasting with Irish Catholicism. Other English groups returned home after the colonial period, but not here, and resulting in tensions, particularly after Irish independence in 1921.
A few hours later, get a coach south via Newry, still in Britain, but seemingly like all small Northern Ireland towns, in resplendent Irish colors, architecture, and historic layout. Drogheda, a further hour south back in Ireland, is another pleasant town to explore, including bookshops with bays of proud history. Then, a few kilometers west at Slane, I walk to a hostel within a farm outside the town, again getting a dorm to myself here in low season. This is near the Bruna-Boyne Neolithic complex, dated to 3200 BCE, and the hostel management give me a lift there in the morning, where the touristy visitor center for multinationality tour buses escorts groups with guides to the site. The principal circular mound of Newgrange contains a narrow and irregular 19-meter megalithic souterrain, aligned with the winter solstice sunrise and leading to a small vaulted room with alcoves, possibly for burials. The coarsely shaped rock slabs have small packing stones around, in the touching simplicity of a primitive and distant world, and nothing like the Egyptian precision mega-engineering from similar times. In the morning, buses dawdle to the airport, where the plane captain threatens to throw off drunk passengers, even if they're no real trouble, and I begin plans for a trip to locations in Southern Ireland connected with Bax, which I eventually realize in 2020.
Any questions?